Today, we're heading to New York City, where dreams shine bright, but some hearts live in silence. New York City blazes like a constellation spread across the ground, skyscrapers slicing through the darkness, streetlights flickering like the pulse of a city that never sleeps. People come here to dream, to climb, to chase something bigger than themselves. But beneath the neon and the noise, quieter stories unfold, of love turned into leverage, of loyalty twisted into chains, and of women who seem fragile but carry unimaginable strength. Nora Ellison is one of them. At 30, Nora is a sharp-witted accountant working in a small firm near Wall Street. Numbers are the one place in her life where she feels safe, in control. She doesn't speak much, doesn't seek attention, but there's a quiet steadiness in her gaze that makes people trust her. Yet every night, she leaves that calm behind and returns to a cold apartment she shares with Jason Hale, a man she no longer loves. There was a time when things were good, brief, distant. Now, their marriage exists as a remnant of a promise, not to Jason, but to her father, Walter Ellison. A retired teacher with a failing heart, Walter relies on a costly machine to survive. Jason pays for that machine, and that's the only reason Nora stays. Not for love, for loyalty, not for a future, for her father's breath. Jason has never struck her. He doesn't need to. His words lash like whips, and his gaze wraps around her like iron. To him, she's not a partner. She's a debt. To the outside world, they are a picture-perfect couple. But to Nora, it's just a gilded cage, beautiful, silent, and locked tight. 3 years ago, Nora Ellison's world was brighter. She had just graduated with a degree in accounting and carried a notebook filled with sketches of her dream flower shop. That's when she met Jason Hale at a cafe near Union Square. He had an easy smile, a calm confidence in everything he said. He talked about his career in advertising, the big campaigns he was working on, and Nora, perhaps out of innocence, perhaps out of longing, believed every word. 6 months later, they had a small wedding in Brooklyn. Her father, Walter, sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Nora wore a white dress she had sewn herself, daisies tucked into her hair. That night, their wedding night, was supposed to be the beginning of something beautiful. But then Jason got a phone call. A last-minute client meeting, he said. "Come with me," he told her, pulling her along like it was nothing unusual. Nora didn't question it. She trusted him. They went to a hotel bar. Jason introduced her to a man in a gray suit, with a sleazy smile and a cigar resting between his fingers. Nora felt uneasy but smiled politely. Jason handed her a glass of wine. "Drink this, babe. Relax. He's important." She sipped. It was bitter. Her head spun. After that, everything blurred. Dim lights, an unfamiliar hand brushing hers, Jason sitting across the room, watching. She woke the next morning in their apartment, Jason beside her, his face cold. "You embarrassed us last night," he said, holding up photos. "Lucky I salvaged the deal." From that day on, the photos became her chains, and Jason, the man she once loved, became her captor, using her own trust as the lock. After that wedding night, Nora's life no longer belonged to her. She didn't leave, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't dare. The photos hung over her like a knife suspended in midair, always ready to fall. Jason didn't need to mention them every day, just a glance, a slight shift in tone, and she remembered. Freedom was no longer hers. Every month, Jason paid her father's medical bills, a not-so-gentle reminder that Walter was alive only because of his generosity. Nora worked diligently at a modest accounting firm, enough to buy a few essentials, but everything else, rent, utilities, medication, Jason controlled completely. They barely spoke now. Jason gave orders and Nora followed them. He didn't touch her anymore. No embraces, no kisses, no arguments. Just silence, cold and absolute. She didn't cry, she didn't rage. She simply existed, a shell of a woman living inside a world someone else built for her. The dream of a flower shop had faded, tucked deep into a drawer along with her old sketchbook. She used to draw tulips, daisies, peonies. Now she counted days, counted receipts, and counted how many times Jason checked her phone each week. Her life had become a series of calculations, precise, emotionless, and never allowed to go wrong. Because one wrong number and everything might collapse. That month, Jason was off. He came home later, drank more, snapped often. Nora sensed that something at work was spiraling. A major campaign was nearing deadline. A multi-million-dollar contract with Grant Tech, the tech empire led by Ethan Cross. And Jason, the man who always seemed in control, was starting to unravel. One evening, he walked into the apartment and tossed a tight red dress onto the bed. "Wear this Saturday," he said flatly. "There's a gala. Important client." Nora stared at the dress without a word. It wasn't her. Too short, too revealing, too much like every time Jason dressed her to impress someone else. He stepped closer, voice low but sharp. "Grant Tech is the last chance. I need Ethan Cross to sign off. And you're how I get him to listen." Nora backed away. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Jason met her eyes. "Just make him interested. Make him believe you're my apology for being late. And if you don't," he held up his phone, scrolling through old photos. "Your dad's machine? Gone. You want him to die?" Nora froze. The image of her father in the ICU, frail and barely breathing, slashed through her chest like a blade. She swallowed hard, tears stinging her eyes, and nodded. And just like that, she was a pawn again, Jason's last move in a game he was desperate not to lose. That night, the hotel shimmered with gold, light spilling through curtains and glinting off wine glasses. Music swirled through the air, blending with laughter and clinking glass, a symphony of distraction. Nora stood at the edge of the ballroom, hands trembling around a glass of water. The tight red dress clung to her like another person's skin. It wasn't hers. It was armor Jason had chosen for her. Jason approached, his breath thick with alcohol. "It's time," he muttered. "Room 2104. Ethan's up there. Don't screw this up." He didn't need to say more. Nora knew. Failure meant her father's life would be on the line. They rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened, Jason yanked the only coat she had from her shoulders. "You won't need this," he said, stripping it away. Cold bit her bare skin. At the door, he grabbed her wrist, voice sharp. "You're my apology. Go in there and make him happy." Nora knocked, once, then twice. Each sound a surrender. The door opened. Ethan Cross stood in the frame. Tall, sleeves rolled, expression weary. He froze at the sight of her, a shaking woman, fear in her eyes, shoulders bare beneath a slipping neckline. I'm sorry," Nora whispered. "I didn't want to come." Ethan didn't ask questions. He dropped the papers in his hand and stepped forward as she swayed. His grip was firm but gentle. He steadied her, no judgment in his touch. She nearly collapsed into nothingness, all shame and silence. He closed the door, took off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders. For the first time in years, someone didn't want anything from her except the truth. Nora sat quietly in the armchair near the window, her silhouette reflected in the glass, fragile and flickering like a candle ready to go out. Ethan's jacket rested on her shoulders, a makeshift shield against the cold, against the shame. She didn't look at him. When she spoke, her voice was soft. So soft, it might have been mistaken for wind slipping through a crack in the wall. "I didn't want to come here. I tried to say no." Ethan said nothing. He sat across from her, watching not with curiosity but with concern. She hesitated, then exhaled, like releasing pressure from a sealed wound. "Jason, my husband," she said. "He told me that if I didn't meet you tonight, he'd stop paying for my father's heart machine, and if my dad dies, it'll be my fault." Her hands clenched tightly in her lap, nails digging into her skin. 3 years ago, we got married. I believed him, I really did, but on our wedding night, he pulled me away from the reception, said there was an emergency meeting with a client. I followed him to a bar. There was a man there, someone I didn't know. Jason handed me a drink, smiled, told me to relax. I didn't feel right, but I drank. She swallowed hard. Everything blurred after that, the lights, the voices. I remember a stranger's hand brushing mine. Jason was watching. From a distance. Just watching. Ethan stayed silent, not out of doubt but out of rage he was trying to keep from spilling. The next morning, I woke up in our apartment. Jason was already there, with photos. He said I embarrassed him. Said I was lucky he still got the deal, and if I ever betrayed him or disobeyed, he'd send those pictures to my dad's hospital. Said it would kill him from shame. A single tear slipped down her cheek. But she didn't sob. The pain inside her had long since dried into something quiet. "Pete doesn't hit me," she whispered. "He doesn't need to. I live in fear, in debt, in silence, every day." Ethan nodded slowly, as if to validate everything she'd just laid bare. Then he stood, reached for his phone, and dialed. "Mark," he said, "I need everything on Jason Hale, especially from 3 years ago." When he hung up, his eyes found hers. "You don't deserve to live like this," he said. "Not one more minute. And I'm not letting him keep breaking you." In the days that followed, Ethan found ways to see Nora, not as a savior, but as someone who simply wanted to be near her. He called her accounting office, asking about tax services, his tone so soft that she hesitated, then agreed. They met one quiet evening in Ethan's office. Warm light spilled across the glass walls. On the desk, instead of tax forms, sat a small gift bag. "I didn't really need financial advice," Ethan admitted, offering a rare, awkward smile. He pulled out a soft gray sweater. "I remember you didn't like that dress. Thought this might feel more like you." Nora took it, hands slightly shaking. She slipped it on. The fabric wrapped around her like a comfort she hadn't known in years, and in Ethan's eyes, she didn't see pity, only respect. They started meeting after work, sometimes at a cafe, sometimes in the park near the church. They talked about flowers, her father, pieces of herself she thought she'd lost. One day, Nora brought an old notebook, flipping it open to show sketches of a flower stand she once dreamed of owning. Her fingers trembled as she turned the page. "I used to want a little cart," she said quietly, "right by the park." Ethan stared at the drawing. "You should do it. Start again. And if you need your first customer, I'm here." For the first time in years, Nora smiled. A small smile, but enough to light an entire autumn afternoon. Jason could sense something was off. Nora was coming home later. She no longer walked with her head down or flinched at his words. The old silence, resigned and hollow, was gone. In its place, a new kind of quiet had settled, still soft but steady. He checked her phone while she showered. Messages, call logs, emails, nothing. She had learned to erase every trace. That made him even more uneasy. Once, he tried following her after work. Her cab disappeared into the traffic near Central Park. He stood on the sidewalk, surrounded by blaring horns and cold wind, overwhelmed by a feeling he hadn't known in years. Loss of control. Nora didn't know Jason was watching, but she felt something shifting. Not in his words, but in the silence that had grown razor-sharp. She was changing, and Jason, the man who'd always held the reins, was starting to realize the grip was slipping. The Midtown Tower shimmered under city lights as Jason's advertising firm hosted its annual gala. The event was meant to impress partners, and tonight, their biggest guest was Ethan Cross, CEO of Grant Tech. Nora stood near the edge of the room in a simple black dress, one she'd chosen herself. She was there with Ethan, no longer as someone belonging to Jason, but as someone finally seen. Ethan didn't speak much, but his presence beside her, the gentle touch at her back as they moved, made her feel safe in a way Jason never had. Jason was watching, and he was losing control. When Ethan stepped away to join a short meeting with the board, Jason moved in fast. He grabbed Nora by the wrist and dragged her toward a dim corner. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he hissed, his breath sour with whiskey. "I see the way you look at him. Don't think you're getting away." Nora yanked her hand back. "Let go of me." He leaned in, voice low and venomous. "I still have those photos. One click, your father's treatment ends. You want to play brave? Try me." "She doesn't have to," came a voice from behind. Ethan stepped forward, eyes like steel. "I've been waiting for this." Jason scoffed. "Waiting for what? Some sob story from my whore of a wife?" Ethan didn't answer. He pulled out his phone and hit play. A voice filled the space. Deep, steady. Mark Jensen, the private investigator Ethan had hired weeks ago. "He bragged about it. Wedding night, got her drunk, staged it with a client, snapped photos. Nothing happened, but he's used them ever since. Thought it was smart leverage." Silence fell like a curtain. Jason stood frozen. Nora didn't hide. She stepped forward, meeting his eyes with steady calm. "For 3 years I lived in fear of those photos," she said. "But tonight, I choose freedom." Jason lunged, but Ethan blocked him. Police officers stepped in, moving quickly. Ethan had already alerted them. They cuffed Jason and led him out under the weight of his silence. Ethan turned to Nora, taking her hand. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said. And for the first time, she believed him. A year later, Brooklyn moved to a softer rhythm, far from Manhattan's rush. On a cobblestone street, morning light filtered through the windows of the Wild Root, the name Nora chose for her flower shop. A reminder that even what grows from broken ground can bloom. Inside, the scent of roses, lavender, and daisies danced in the air. Nora, now 31, stood behind the counter, carefully tying a ribbon around her first bouquet of the day. She wore the old gray sweater, Ethan's first gift. Her eyes were calm, her hands steady, her heart healed. Her father, Walter, sat near the window, smiling gently, the soft hum of his heart monitor now a background comfort. He was better, happier, as free as his daughter. The bell over the door jingled. Ethan stepped in, holding a bouquet of white carnations and a paper-wrapped croissant. "Breakfast," he said, and a little reason to smile. Nora laughed, a sound that had become a habit, no longer a rare gift. But Ethan didn't stop there. He walked to her, reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside sat a simple, elegant ring. "I'm not promising you the world," he whispered, "but I promise to help you grow every small corner of it we can call ours." Nora stood still. She looked at him, then around the shop, where flowers bloomed, where her father smiled, and where morning light poured in like a quiet kind of magic. This wasn't a dream anymore. This was the life she had chosen, step by step, scar by scar, petal by petal. Tears shimmered as she smiled. "Yes," she whispered. Ethan held her hand. Outside the door, the world rushed on, but in that moment, everything fell silent, and only one truth remained. She was no longer the woman trapped behind glass. She had walked through the fire and stayed because this time she chose herself.